Welcome to Ball State's inaugural 3-minute thesis competition. Thank you all for coming and supporting our 10 finalists. I'm Nathan Hitchens. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Geography, and I'll be doing this. I'll be emceeing tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Dean of the Graduate School, Adam Beach, to make some opening remarks.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us tonight. We're celebrating the graduate school. This is our month to celebrate the centennial, and in 2018, it was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the graduate school at Ball State. So we thought this would be a great way to commemorate that anniversary. Why 3MT? We believe that we have a bit of a crisis in higher education and the kinds of disconnects we see between the work we do in the university and the general public. Obviously, there are a complex set of reasons for this phenomenon, but it does raise the question of what we can do on our end at the university to close this gap in understanding. Programs like 3MT point the way. And I see programs like this at the graduate level, and I also see professional organizations doing this. So my big professional organization, the Modern Language Association, just launched a 5-minute competition for advanced researchers in the field to explain their research to the general public. And I thought that was a really tremendous outreach. So I think we're all thinking about this. How can we connect the work we're doing here with wider audiences? The 3MT asks our students to communicate very complex ideas in a way that is accessible and understandable to a general audience. This, as any researcher understands, is a really hard task. And I was talking to a couple of the students here, and they said, this was really hard when I first started trying to do this. At the university, we ask our students and faculty to engage in very specific research projects in very sophisticated and high-level areas. Every field has its own specialized language, technical knowledge, theoretical paradigms in which they work. The question is how to translate this very specific high-level knowledge to people completely outside the field. And one thing that I've really enjoyed being the dean of the graduate school is just interacting with people who work in totally different disciplines from myself. So I think even within the university, we have this challenge. How do we translate what people do in English to what people do in biotechnology? And how do we talk to each other and have understanding of what we do? I remember when I was writing my dissertation and my parents or family members would ask me what my dissertation was about. And so I remember very clearly having this challenge. How long do you have? I've been working on this for a year and a half. I've read like 500 books. Like, what do you want to know? And so this is a real challenge. How do I tell people what I'm working on in a way that they can understand? And my parents, neither one of them went to college, so I think there's additional challenge of just for them to try to understand the kind of work that I was doing. 3MT asked students to think carefully about the best strategy to get people outside their fields and even those outside the university to understand and hopefully to support and become invested in their research and this wider academic enterprise that we all value so much of research and scholarship. So we had 42 intrepid students who took up this challenge in the preliminary rounds. And you'll hear today from the 10 who advanced from the preliminary rounds, these brilliant students who will no doubt get you very involved in their work. So I'm so excited to be here today to hear the presentations, and I get to be a judge, so that's even more exciting. Our graduate students at Ball State enhance the research mission of our university and are central to it in so many ways. We are thrilled to have this venue to promote and celebrate their work. No matter who wins today, we're all proud of you and so glad to have had the chance to hear about your research. So with that, no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Nathan. And I want to say a special thanks to Nathan. Nathan is an assistant professor. He's on the graduate education committee. And when he heard that we were thinking about doing this, he about jumped out of his seat and wanted to help. And he's been instrumental in helping us organize this, drum up support for it. He organized the preliminary rounds, and we really couldn't have done it without him. So I really want to thank him for his help. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Adam. Before we get going, I want to go over a couple things. First, give you guys a very, very, very brief history of the 3-minute thesis. So this was originated in Queensland, Australia, so just down the road. So that's kind of where the 3-minute thesis started, there in Australia. And 2008 was the first competition held at the University of Queensland. The next year, they promoted it to other Australian and New Zealand universities, and it became very popular. It's, as Adam noted, it was an idea that other groups are putting on in some way or another. So it caught fire, and by now we have this held in more than 600 universities in 65 countries across the world, and Ball State is joining those ranks this year. So let me take just a moment, and if any of these individuals are here, please stand up. I want to acknowledge our 6 judges that served in this role in our preliminary rounds, of which we had 2. Carol Friesen from Nutrition and Health Science, Michelle Glowacki-Dudka from Educational Studies, Melissa Holtzman from Sociology, James Johnson from Kinesiology, Kristen Ritchie from Psychological Science, and Petra Zimmerman from Geography. Now, I'm not going to name all of these names, but I do want to recognize the participants who participated in our 2 preliminary rounds. If any of you are here, please stand and let the rest of us recognize your participation. Or we can all just recognize them, and I'll send each of them a personal email to let them know that each of you applauded for them. They will appreciate it. All right, so I think you've probably got the gist of what we're doing here tonight just based on the name, but I just want to give you the premise of this whole thing. Number 1, it's 3-minute thesis, so believe it or not, we're giving them a 3-minute time limit. That's a hard 3 minutes, so if they go over and they have a clock they can see, if they go over, they will be disqualified. I know we won't have any problems because all 10 of them managed to stay under 3 minutes to get here. So they've got 3 minutes. You'll see when each of them come up, they have a single static PowerPoint slide to use for whatever they deem necessary. So there's not going to be animations, music, anything happening. They don't have any additional props, so hopefully no one tried to sneak in a beaker or, I don't know, a funny hat, or I don't know what your props would be. So no props. It's all spoken words, so no songs, no singing, no poem readings. It's just them up here for 3 minutes with one slide talking about what they've been working on for their graduate studies here at Ball State. And I very briefly want to talk to you about what our 3 judges are going to be undertaking in evaluating all of our 10 finalists. There's 2 main areas they're going to evaluate them on. Comprehension and content is the first. So basically how well they can provide an understanding of what they're doing, so the background, the significance, how well do they describe the impact or results of what they're doing, in a way that they can understand as judges, as we can understand as audience members. And then the engagement and communication part of this. So beyond just telling everyone, the other half is engaging, drawing us in, drawing you and the judges in. So however they go about it, trying to move that enthusiasm for what they're doing from them to you, so you're invested with them over that brief 3 minutes. All right, so one final thing before we get this going. I want to introduce the 3 members of our judging panel. So as I call your name, please stand. First, you heard from him, we have Adam Beach, the Dean of the Graduate School. So Dr. Beach is a professor of English. He earned his PhD from SUNY Buffalo and served as an administrator in Ball State's English department for 10 years, including a 3-year stint as the department chair. Along with 15 published or forthcoming articles on nationalism, slavery, and colonialism in 18th century British literature, he co-edited a collection of essays invoking slavery in the 18th century British imagination. He also co-founded the Digital Literature Review, an immersive learning project. Dr. Beach has worked closely with many Masters of Arts and PhD students and is thrilled to help support graduate education and graduate students in his position as Dean of the Graduate School. Next, we have Susan McDowell. She's Vice Provost for Research here at Ball State. And in addition to Vice Provost of Research, Dr. McDowell is a professor of biology. She earned her PhD from the University of Cincinnati and was a postdoctoral fellow at Lilly Research Laboratories in Indianapolis. At Ball State, she taught within the biotechnology program for 15 years prior to her current role and has worked with more than 50 students in her research lab. These students are co-authors on publications, have received their own internal and external funding, and most are pursuing and sustaining careers within the biotechnology field after they graduate. And our third judge is Jennifer Mearns. She's Ball State's First Lady. Mrs. Mearns holds a Bachelor of Science from Bryant University, where she served for 9 years on the Board of Trustees, including 3 years as vice chair. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in executive recruiting and talent acquisition, having started her search career as a partner with Teamwork Consulting, a boutique executive search firm specializing in the sports marketing industry. Mrs. Mearns founded JPM Consulting Services in 2003, which provides executive recruiting, talent acquisition, talent assessment, and general organizational consulting to a wide variety of clients. She actively serves on a number of not-for-profit boards focusing on education and children and families in need. All right, and one last thing I promise. Maybe this is the good stuff, I don't know. So we are going to be giving out at the conclusion 4 awards. So we'll have first place, who will receive $1,000, and that person will represent Ball State at the Midwest Association of Graduate Schools, their annual meeting coming up next month, in which they hold a regional 3-minute thesis competition. So, we have our Ball State representative, all expenses paid, so they'll get to go and represent us well for the first time. Second place will receive $700. $500 will go to third place. And I'll mention this again at the conclusion of all 10 of our finalist presentations tonight. All of you will have the opportunity to choose someone. You don't have to all huddle up together and try to decide. But using your phone, or talk to me if you don't have a phone, we're going to get you choosing who you thought is most deserving. So it's people's choice, so I can't dictate how you choose. You just have to choose one of the 10. So I'll mention that again at the conclusion, how you can go about making that vote. So without further ado, I will present the first speaker tonight, Melody Griffin. She is from Emerging Media Design and Development. And Melody's thesis study was recently accepted into the 2019 Human-Computer Interaction Conference at Disney World. She has applied to various conferences across the world, including Japan and London, which she will know if she was accepted by next month. Alongside research, traveling is one of her favorite pastimes, so graduate school has really encompassed the majority of her dreams. And she'll be speaking tonight on evaluating player immersion in survival horror video games.
Thank you. Okay, so imagine that you wake up in a dark, isolated town, and the only people nearby are part of a baby-killing cult, and they want to kill you. You only have a camera's night vision to see anything in front of you. Aside from that, you have no additional weapons, so in order to survive, you've got to hide. This is the premise of Outlast 2, a 2017 survival horror video game. And I chose Outlast 2 as my video game for user testing simply because it encompasses all the basic characteristics of survival horror. It's very restrictive in its nature, taking all control away from the player with only one way to move forward and no way to fight back. Now, imagine that scenario again if you were using virtual reality enhancement. Virtual reality enhancement allows the player a more engaging and interactive experience with this virtual world. It does this by isolating noises, as well as giving the player a much fuller perspective of that virtual world. Now, my thesis study encompasses and evaluates the ways in which a player engages with Outlast 2, with and without using virtual reality enhancement. This is so I can identify what components of survival horror video game design truly encompass and promote the highest level of player engagement, which I will refer to from now on as optimal player immersion. Now, in short, I'm trying to figure out the best possible way to not only challenge and excite players, but also scare them so that they don't become too bored or too afraid to continue playing the game. I'll do this by using 3 different methods. The first is user observation, which is simply me watching the player as they're playing Outlast 2. The second is interviewing the player after they've played Outlast 2. And the third is conducting 2 surveys, one that they'll fill out before playing Outlast 2, and the second after they played Outlast 2. Now, it is my hope that the effect of this research will provide game designers and researchers a framework for an understanding of harnessing these sensations through perspective and narrative in survival horror video games. This will create the best possible gameplay imaginable for you, the player. This is exactly what I mean by optimal player immersion. Thank you.
So next we have Nathan Edwards. He's from Exercise Science, and Nathan is currently studying the golf swing, but is interested in working with tactical athletes such as military, police, and firefighters. Next fall, he'll be starting a PhD program at The Ohio State University in the MOVES Lab. That's Movement Optimization and Prevention for Exercise Sustainment. And tonight, he'll be talking to us about lower back pain in golf, a biomechanical perspective.
You hear birds chirping and squirrels scurrying about as you walk down the fairway. And upon your brow, you feel a bit of perspiration. Now, while golf is a relatively low-intensity form of activity, the health benefits you can receive from playing golf are substantial. While carrying or pushing a 30-pound golf bag over undulating hills, golfers can improve their cardiovascular fitness. They can improve their muscular strength, their balance, their coordination, even visual spatial awareness, and improve their social connectedness. And with millions of people playing golf each year, it provides a large basis for increasing physical activity in the general population. Now, while golf is a relatively low-intensity activity with low-impact forces throughout, the golf swing itself is a very dynamic movement, with many of the body's joints moving while you swing. And these patterns increase the risk for overuse injuries to occur. And the most frequent location for injuries to occur is to the lower back. Now, golf teaching professionals understand certain positions in the golf swing increase your risk of developing lower back pain. However, researchers haven't looked and quantified these positions biomechanically. So the purpose of my thesis was to identify what physical characteristics and also what swing characteristics golfers may have that would increase the risk for developing lower back pain. Now I'm nearing the end of data collection, and there are some interesting trends starting to appear. You can see on screen images of two different golfers who have come into the biomechanics lab and I've tested. One who had a history of back pain and one who has not. One position that golf teaching professionals act as a risk factor, identify as a risk factor for lower back pain, is trunk hyperextension, specifically during the follow-through. Now, it's easy to see the difference between these two golfers in the amount of hyperextension there is at the back. Often, this is referred to as a reverse C position because it makes a reverse C. This position in particular increases the compressive forces on the vertebrae, as well as increasing the lateral shear or the sliding forces occurring at the spine, which over time can cause the bone tissue to degrade and eventually lead to back pain. So the goal of my thesis, what I want to do is I want to help people who play golf and also people who teach golf understand what risk factors are most associated with back pain so that they can prevent or reduce the amount of back pain occurring in the future so that golfers can continue to play and continue to reap all of the benefits associated with the great game. Thanks.
All right, our next speaker is Melinda Zerker. She is from elementary education, and Melinda lives in Fort Wayne with her husband and 4 children. She graduated this past December and plans to continue writing about her research and hopes to eventually teach at a university. She has presented her research at the Association of Literacy Educators and Researchers Conference and the Indiana Association for the Education of Young Children Conference. And tonight she'll be speaking on instructing preschool writers, interactive writing, and the writing workshop.
How would you answer this question? Are 4- and 5-year-old students capable of writing and becoming authors? In the course of my research, I asked preschool students this very question: are you an author? Many of the students answered positively and demonstrated a growing understanding of the role of an author. In the past 30 years, the field of early literacy has also answered this question with a resounding yes. 4- and 5-year-old students are capable of writing. In fact, writing is often a natural gateway into reading for these students. As educators, the question then is how to best teach these young writers. 2 instructional methods have come to the forefront of our research in early literacy: writing workshop and interactive writing. Both of these methods have been studied and developed for many years, but only recently have been considered for our youngest students. Writing workshop is a framework that consists of a large group mini lesson, independent student writing, teacher conferences, and opportunities for students to share their writing. Interactive writing, on the other hand, involves sharing the pen as a teacher and group of students work together to create a message on chart paper. My research considered the effects of writing workshop, interactive writing, and traditional instruction on the achievement of 4- and 5-year-old students. I conducted a mixed methods quasi-experimental study for this purpose. Quantitatively, as you can see, the students' pre- and post-tests provided evidence that students in the treatment classes made significant progress in foundational writing skills compared to the traditional classroom. My qualitative data, which consisted of teacher and student interviews, weekly classroom observations, and student writing samples, made clear that students in the interactive writing class had more opportunities to develop foundational writing skills, and students in the writing workshop formed stronger identities as writers. When asked if they were an author, students in the traditional classroom most often responded, "No, I don't really know how to write yet," or "Maybe I'll grow up to be a writer someday." On the other hand, students in the writing workshop believed that they were already authors. And why wouldn't they? They had created over 30 different books themselves that they had shared with audiences. Children are often much more capable than we give them credit for. I believe my research highlights the immense writing potential that young children hold. Instructional methods like writing workshop and interactive writing provide the tools to unlock that potential. Thank you.
All right, next we have Jordan Patterson from Emerging Media Design and Development. Jordan was born and raised in Urbana, Illinois, but received his undergraduate degree from North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. He is hoping to be a part of the tech or entertainment industry after graduate school, working as a product manager, and to continue pursuing music with the hopes that it could turn into a career at some point in his life. He won awards from Axe Body Wash and John Legend for his music production skills, and is a two-time Taco Bell two-time Taco Bell Live Moss scholarship winner for aspiring creatives. Don't tell him I messed that up. His talk tonight is, Have We Done Enough for Our Creative and Artistic Students? A Future Framework for University Investment in Student Passions.
Good evening, my name is Jordan Patterson, and I want to start by telling a story. So let's jump back to 2016. I had just finished performing on stage for the last time in my college career. And as I'm walking home, I got these memories from college running through my mind and this passion running down my spine, and then it hits me. It's this feeling of unsolved frustration, because I realized throughout my entire college career, I had been on this musical journey by myself. It was hard to find musicians and artists similar to myself. And nobody was building spaces for people like me to come and engage in our skills. But nevertheless, I came to Ball State in 2017, and I was told in order to graduate, we had to do a master's thesis or creative project. I said, okay, cool. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I know what I have to do, so I started to do my research. And I looked at the history of the music industry. I looked at unfair compensation of artists, and I looked at how streaming sites have become the thing of the present. But none of it was interesting to me, except for this idea of building community. Now, building community is very interesting, and something that I took for granted when I was in college. I wasn't able to find it. So I went out and I found students that were passionate about their art, similar to how I was. And I said, you know what, come to the space every week with something new. A new piece of work, some music, a question that you have, or a piece of technology that you want to explore. And let's get to it. And I said, you know what, here's what happened. As soon as I put these students into a space, I realized that there was something to learn, that these students needed a place to come to where they could learn new skills and build on their passions. And I thought what was interesting was that they called the space the vision. The vision is, and this is how they defined it, the grind that comes before the payoff. And I said, okay, cool, so you see this space as a vehicle to help you artistically grow, to get to a point where you can use your passion in the professional world. Now here's where things get very interesting. Imagine these communities existing somewhere else on campus or everywhere on campus, in business, STEM, TCOM, and architecture, theater, where students get to go to these spaces and learn about skills that they didn't know they had or they did know that they had, where they can create, collaborate, share, mentor, and be in spaces with other artists that they didn't know existed on campus. Imagine people going to the music building right across the street and engaging with the $1 million studios that are right upstairs on the second floor. Or people who didn't even know they liked music going up to those studios and engaging with students who are interested in music as well. See, the vision is just a blueprint for all this, but Ball State can be the first movers in this. They can teach students how to get engaged in their passions and to turn it into something where they can make money from it. And not only that, but engage with other students and be able to build content so Ball State becomes the first university that hosts things like the vision. My name is Jordan Patterson. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Dana Arnett from chemistry. Dana is from Detroit, Michigan, and is working on biochemistry research under the advisory of Dr. Mary Conkle. She is attending medical school in the fall to specialize in obstetrics and gynecology, and is presenting her research at the National American Chemical Society Conference in April as part of the LGBTQ+ Professionals Biological Chemistry Division. And tonight, she's going to be talking about binding studies of mitonite with products of lipid peroxidation.
How many of you in this room have or know someone with diabetes? See, that's not surprising, because globally, 1 in every 11 adults has diabetes, with 95% of them being type 2. Individuals with this disease live with a lifetime of problems, from heart disease to poor blood sugar control. And though diabetes research has made leaps and bounds in the last few years, sadly, a cure is still not within our reach. Enter mitonite. Mitonite is an outer mitochondrial membrane protein known as a binding site to lactose, a common type 2 diabetic drug. Mitonite is also a metalloprotein, so it hosts an iron-sulfur cluster. Now, while the true function of mitonite isn't known, previous studies have shown that mitonite may play a bigger role in diabetes than previously understood. For example, when mitonite was removed from gene expression in lab mice, as shown by the mouse pancake behind me, these mice remained incredibly obese, but showed little to no insulin resistance and normal blood sugar levels, subscribing to the idea of mitonite's role in diabetes. So, for my thesis, we want to understand mitonite's true role in the cell, besides a drug binding site, and what we have hypothesized is that mitonite is in a cycle of oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, which causes DNA damage, protein oxidation, and cell death, is also a proposed cause of insulin resistance, and ultimately, type 2 diabetes. Currently, we are reacting mitonite with small molecules that are products of oxidative stress, such as 4-HNA and 4-ONE. And we want to understand how this binding affects the structure and the output of mitonite in cells. And what we have found is not only do 4-HNA and 4-ONE bind with mitonite and change its structure, but it binds at the same amino acid that has been identified as a common binding site for mitonite reactions. So, what does this mean in terms of the cycle? Now that we're identifying where these small molecules are reacting, we can hopefully find at what concentration these small molecules can release free iron from the iron-sulfur cluster into the cell. Once that free iron is released, it can react with reactive oxygen species from oxidative stress to create more of these byproducts to react with mitonite and continue the cycle. We are still leaps and bounds away from a cure to diabetes. But with understanding what mitonite's role in oxidative stress is, and ultimately oxidative stress's role in type 2 diabetes, we can work on that ratio of 1 in every 11 adults with diabetes and make it much, much smaller. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Byron Long from Counseling Psychology. Byron is a Muncie local studying how therapeutic interventions impact the brain. He has presented research at regional conferences and has been involved with projects presented at national conferences. For his career, he hopes to be involved in research, therapy, and the training of future mental health professionals, either in a faculty position or at a university counseling center. And tonight, he's going to be speaking about the insecure brain and brief meditation.
While treating patients with tuberculosis, doctors in the 1950s discovered that the drug epsoniopride also improved mood. They had stumbled onto what would become one of the first antidepressants. And at that time, they didn't know why it worked, they just saw that it did. But by researching why it worked, mental health care has improved through the creation of medication that targets specific brain chemistry. So I ask, if this has worked for medication, why not apply the approach to therapy? To do that, I'm using neuroscience to study mindfulness meditation. This is a type of meditation that emphasizes being present-focused, non-judgmental, and open to one's experience. It's widely used throughout therapy and is even the basis for some entire treatments. More specifically, I'm looking at people with insecure attachments and meditation. So these are individuals who experience a higher level of anxiety in intimate relationships or avoid closeness and tend to shut down. So, as a therapist, I'm interested in this population because they run a risk of experiencing higher levels of various mental health concerns. Now, to do this, I hook people up to our EEG machine using a funny cap like the one up there. That allows me to record their brain activity while they are completing an emotionally upsetting task and listening to a recorded meditation. From that brain data, we get event-related potentials, which look like that waveform up there. Now, this wave tells us what your brain is dedicating resources to before you're even conscious of it. And that shaded part you see, that's called the LPP. And this is essentially a call from the brain saying, all hands on deck, pay attention to this. For example, we know that emotionally upsetting pictures produce a higher LPP. So what I'm looking for to happen is for that LPP to get smaller following the meditation, as this would suggest the meditation impacted how we process and in turn experience emotions. So with that, we can take a page from the pharmaceutical playbook and use this type of evidence to develop interventions that target biological and psychological processes. Now, currently, I'm collecting data, and the potential implications are really exciting. This project stands to improve the evidence base for meditation and also help the way that we help people. Now, I know a brief meditation might not sound like much, but hear me out. In 2016, while I was doing disaster relief work after tornadoes had ripped through the city of Kokomo, I only had a brief amount of time to work with survivors. And I've had the same type of limitations in things like crisis intervention. So with my research, I'm saying let's make the most of brief by using neuroscience to better our understanding and our treatment. Thank you.
All right, next up we have Rebecca Rudolph from Emerging Media Design and Development. Rebecca is a born and raised Hoosier. She's finishing up her studies in Emerging Media Design and Development, of which she plans to use towards her museum career. Currently, Rebecca works in the agricultural department at the Conner Prairie Museum. Eventually, she would like to pursue a career in exhibition design and development, but for now, she's content caring for all the baby goats. Tonight, she's going to be speaking on the museum experience, the relationship between visitors, human interpreters, and digital technology in a living history museum.
Good evening. A little over 3 years ago, I began my career in a museum as a historical interpreter. Now, as a historical interpreter, I help visitors engage with exhibits either as myself or as a costume character. Shortly after I started, my mentor approached our team with a common museum problem. He wanted to know how he could get visitors more engaged with his exhibit. My thesis is a study to help find some of these answers. So I wanted to know, what is the relationship between the visitor, human interpreter, and digital technology in an exhibit, as well as how do these two platforms create educational and entertaining experiences? So as part of my research, I gathered two groups of participants representing common demographics of museum visitors, adults and fourth grade students. Now, I took groups of these participants to a museum where they experienced 3 exhibits. Exhibit 1 demonstrated human interpretation, Exhibit 2 demonstrated digital technology, and Exhibit 3 contained both. After an exhibit was experienced, visitors would complete a survey designed to measure their experience. Then, after all 3 exhibits were visited, the participants would sit down with me and we would discuss their experience in a semi-structured method. And from these methods, I learned a couple of things. First, most participants enjoyed the mixed platform exhibit the best, as the elements of human interpretation and digital technology help create a balance between education and entertaining experience. Second, there were mixed reviews on if participants wanted to engage with human interpreters. However, all adult participants agreed that they saw the value in them, as some believed that the human interpreter was more capable of elaborating on content as well as personalizing the visitor experience over digital technology. And finally, I learned that a meaningful experience for visitors includes the option of actively doing something. This could be a simple task, such as flipping charts on signs, to more complicated activities, such as participating in hands-on work that an interpreter is demonstrating. So what does this mean? Well, first, this information could be valuable to museums, as this information could give some more insight into the modern visitor's experience. Second, I strongly believe that visitor experience of any environment could reveal this desire to find balance between human-human interaction and human-computer interaction. Because in the end, what matters most to people is making an internal and external connection to the world around them. How museums find balance implementing these different platforms could also help other industries create and find meaningful relationships with their visitors too. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Christopher Reinhardt from Architecture. Christopher is a non-traditional graduate student that began his career on construction sites, digging ditches and swinging a hammer, which ultimately led him to formally study design and architecture. He's presented ideas about architecture and sustainability to many audiences, including at the Living Future Conference and the TEDx Bloomington stage. Upon graduation, he will become the Director of Sustainability and Research at Kripe Architects and Engineers. And his talk tonight is Arboreal Alchemy.
Humans have deep and primal connections with trees. Think of the tree of life or the tree of enlightenment. And we can imagine wild and creative visions of trees like those we see in sci-fi and fantasy films like Avatar and Lord of the Rings. Having roots in both those ancient connections and futuristic and fantastic visions, there's a series of architectural proposals by myself and others that imagine living in fully enclosed and fully alive tree buildings. And while we can imagine such tree buildings, no one has yet made them come to life. We call projects like this paper architecture because they don't get off the page and into reality. But over here, we see many examples, built projects, that demonstrate the viability of creating structures from living trees. We have living root bridges that can span for hundreds of feet, horticultural techniques of pleaching, espalier, topiary, and bonsai, dramatic arboreal sculptures, and woven structures of fast-growing willow. So the question is, how do we get from projects like these that we know can be done to projects like these that we can only imagine? How do we invent enclosures for living tree structures? These questions are the essence of my research. And I believe that in order to do this, we have to get our ideas off the page and work with real living trees. Of course, the challenge with this is the aspect of time. And so we address that in two ways. First, we work with both bonsai scale trees and full-scale trees because even though it takes about a decade or more to get to the first full-scale prototypes, we can get to the bonsai scale prototypes in just a fraction of that time and still learn the same lessons. And second, we capture our living trees using 3D scanning and photogrammetry techniques so we can move them into the computer as a digital 3D mesh, and then we can use computer modeling software to project the growth and shaping of those trees over time so we can visualize the entire process. So it's like a nursery operation side by side with a architecture, visualization, and animation studio creating movies and interactive virtual worlds and bonsai scale prototypes of enclosures and full scale living tree architecture prototypes. The living tree dwellings of the future will both inspire and delight those experiencing them, just like these examples here. And using a method like this, we can get from what we know can be done to what we can only imagine. This opens up a whole new set of possibilities for living in harmony with our planet, for restoring balance to our damaged ecosystems, and supporting the transition to a new paradigm of deep reconnection with nature. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anna Farello from Physical Education. Anna is originally from the Los Angeles area. She's currently a graduate student in the Sport and Exercise Psychology program, doing research on positive youth development through sport and sport for development and peace. She plans to pursue a PhD in sport for development and peace as well, and tonight she's going to speak to us about female youth refugees' experiences in sport, exercise, and physical activity.
In 2018, over 25 million refugees were displaced from their homeland. Of those, the majority were youth. And while youth face challenges such as making new friends and becoming a family translator, female youth refugees face additional gender-based and educational difficulties. So, interestingly, a lot of the factors that contribute to healthy resettlement, like sense of belonging, autonomy, and social connections, are also potential byproducts of participating in physical activity. So I was interested in asking female youth refugees about their experiences and how they manage during that transitional time. So 2 of my research questions were, what role does physical activity, sport, and exercise play in their ability to resettle? And what role does physical activity, exercise, and sport play in their sense of autonomy, relationship, and sense of belonging? So, using semi-structured interviews and a photo voice task, I interviewed 9 female youth refugees from Burma. The initial interview involved getting to know them about their current and past experiences in physical activity and how they got here, everything like that. Then I gave them a digital camera, asked them to take up to 20 photos representing challenges and highlights that they faced in regards to physical activity. Then the second interview was about them analyzing their photos with me. The interviews were analyzed using hermeneutic phenomenology, which is basically just finding themes and creating dimensions from those themes. So emerging themes, such as feeling like they were incompetent in sport, which made them feel like they didn't belong, valuing peer relationships, and really appreciating choice and autonomy, relate back to self-determination theory, which has 3 components of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In terms of resettlement, themes emerged such as physical activity being exciting, physical activity being fun and inciting positive emotions, the impact of their cultural differences, and social connections as well. So the photo on the right was taken by a participant who said that the weather was a huge barrier for her and that she didn't really go outside or participate in physical activity when it was cold. So that exemplifies the power that incompetence can have and the lack of knowledge of indoor physical activity on this individual. On the left, this participant took a picture for roller skates because she really finds solace in being outside, roller skating around her neighborhood with her dog. And this exemplifies how important autonomy is for her to enjoy physical activity. So how can school districts and local communities better support their refugee populations? For one, coaches and PE teachers could get to know their refugees better, their refugee students. They could explain concepts and novel sports rules to them because they don't understand. And so the finalized results of the study will go back to the school district that they're a part of and hopefully aid the school district in better helping these refugees adapt to their local culture. Thanks.
All right, and our final presenter tonight is Kirsten Vasura from biology. Kirsten grew up in Minnesota and graduated from the University of Minnesota in fisheries biology in 2017. Her research involves using online and app data as a tool for fisheries management. She's also completing a project on the feasibility of using CRISPR-Cas9 gene drive technology as a management solution for invasive lionfish in the Caribbean. After she graduates from Ball State, she plans on pursuing a PhD in fisheries management and becoming a professor. And tonight she's going to talk to us about invasion superhighways, how fishing paves the way for the spread of exotic species.
Our lakes are being invaded, and it's because of you. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if you fish or not. Although if you do, it could be partially because of you. Humans are spreading aquatic invasive species at unprecedented rates across the lakes in the United States. Aquatic invasive species are organisms that invade new ecosystems and cause harm to the economy, the environment, and human health. I'm sure many of you have heard of zebra mussels, lionfish, or Asian carp. These are all examples of aquatic invasive species that have made quite the splash in this country. Managing invasive species is a difficult task, especially because they can be spread in so many different ways. They can spread naturally through waterways, for example, between 2 lakes connected by a stream, and they can also be spread by humans, such as in ballast water, pet releases, shipping containers, and by anglers, or fishermen and fisherwomen. Anglers can spread invasive plants, fish, and invertebrates when those species get stuck on or in their boats, buckets, and boots. And because these species tend to be resilient, even transferring a few organisms can create long-term problems, including, ironically, poor fishing opportunities. Managing invasive species is a difficult task, especially when it comes to preventing new invasions. And that's where my research comes in. I'm looking at how lakes are connected, both through natural hydrology and by anglers, so that we can prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. To understand these connections, I created 2 networks of the United States. The first network, shown on top, uses data from the U.S. Geological Survey to describe how lakes are connected based on rivers and streams. This network shows that nearby lakes are connected based on how rivers and streams flow among them. The second network is a rare and unprecedented glimpse into the way that anglers connect lakes based on how they move among them to fish. I developed this network using data anglers entered into FishBrain, a smartphone app used by millions of anglers among the world. I have access to over 3 million angler fishing trips recorded in the United States. Anglers recorded where and when they went fishing, and when I look at where these trips take place, I can piece together which lakes are connected and how many anglers connect them. The more anglers that connect 2 lakes, the higher the chance of invasive species spreading between them. This network shows how 150 anglers connected 75 different lakes in Wisconsin. Even on a short scale, I'm finding that anglers connect multiple lakes over a short time frame. These networks are different, and they show that lakes are more connected because of anglers. By comparing the hydrologic and the human network, I'm finding which lakes are the most vulnerable to invasive species. Because I have so much data, I'm doing this on local, statewide, and national levels. My data is helping natural resource managers decide where to dedicate their time, energy, and resources towards monitoring for and preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. Aquatic invasive species pose a massive risk to our aquatic resources, and my research is part of the solution. Thank you.
All right, I will ask that you please give one more round of applause to all 10 of our fantastic finalists. And as they finish up here, I'll also ask that you give a round of applause to our 3 judges for taking this time to judge our fantastic finalists. And the rest of you, please join us downstairs in the lobby to enjoy some of our refreshments. In about a half an hour, we will announce and present the awards from tonight. So thank you very much. See you downstairs.